Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from deltacx.com. We're a full service CX and UX consultancy. We do projects, training, and consulting. Check us out. We also have a conference coming up in October. It's called Concentric. And if you'd like to register, we've made it nicely priced for those of you who need that right now. Just go to deltacx.com/concentric. Before we have our guest on today for office hours, so of course it's office hours, which means we're here for an hour taking your questions. Start asking them. We've got 3 already queued up, which we'll start with in a moment. But of course, as always, I want to take a moment to thank our junior, mid-level, and senior low ego action heroes who are donating to the channel through the YouTube memberships. Just go to YouTube and find Delta CX, of course, and click join. Totally optional. I have a day job, or at least I did until about a week or 2 ago. Thanks to everybody who's keeping me in streaming software and delicious chocolate chips, which I definitely ate today. So moving on, let's see. Today is office hours, yes. So let me bring in our guest, and he can tell you who he is, and he can tell you the sparkling news that he's hiring. Jeremy is back. If you missed Jeremy last time and you say, wow, I want to hear more from this guy, make sure you go to YouTube and type in Delta CX Jeremy. And I bet the other show will pop up. So Jeremy, tell us about you.
Hi, great, Debbie. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here again. Always enjoy our conversations. So I've been floating around the UX world since the mid-90s in a variety of roles, from individual consultant to big agency, internal teams. I've been in Fortune 100s to startups. I've spent a lot of the last decade or so largely building UX practices, a lot of startups, but also some moderate sized companies as well. So that's just a couple things.
Good.
Then people's questions.
Yeah, we want to hear what you have to say. And also, you say you are hiring. Do tell.
Yes. So I currently I'm building the UX practice at a company called Omnicell. And Omnicell does pharmacy robotics, which is to make it more accessible. If you or someone you cared about was in the hospital, it's 8 a.m., it's time for your morning meds. A nurse is going to go to a locked cabinet and log in and say, oh, Debbie needs these 3 medications. And the machine knows what you need. It's only going to light up and unlock the drawer where the first one is, and only unlock and light up a pocket where that medication is. Nurse picks that one, closes it up, does the same for all yours. So we make sure that the nurse gets the right medications. We have other machines in the basement that hold all that inventory, and that farm techs are going to be moving throughout the hospital, making sure that they reload all these cabinets. And we have another set of machines that helps techs mix, do compounding like IVs and syringes very precisely, and one machine just does it for you. It's pretty awesome. So we do the local UIs, we do the cloud-based software to help run the whole thing, and we were looking for some mid-level product designers. Not a title I love, but it was there. One of the things I haven't bothered to change yet. You got to pick your battles. It is a semi-generalist role, though kind of more of an emphasis on interaction design. So if folks want to learn more, you can either reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be posting those links probably later today, or you can look them at omnicell.com, where all our job postings are. We're actually also still hiring a senior role as well.
Great. And so just so I can spell that for everybody who is joining, Omnicell is OMNICELL. And Jeremy, if you want to look for him on LinkedIn, is JEREMY, last name KRIEGEL. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. A lot of people put an N in there, but I do not bring gifts on Christmas. I mean, I will, but not to the whole world.
But only if you pay in advance. Okay. So for some reason, my chat system is not fully working. But what I'll do is I'm going to put up our first question. And while you answer it, I'm going to do a little troubleshooting so I can make sure I capture everyone's question. So our first question came in anonymously earlier, and it says, what advice do you give concerning overthinking in UX? Thinking about processes, where do you just check the box?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've had similar conversations a lot recently, because we are a team, like most teams, that is likely understaffed given the demand in the organization. So this is a very salient question. One of the ways I like to think about it is, what are the consequences if we're wrong? If it's a big consequence, we might want to keep thinking about it. If it's a little consequence, maybe we're okay doing with whatever we have. And if it's in the middle, maybe we want to measure some things to see if it becomes a problem. But that's like one of the biggest things. Look, what's the impact of being wrong? And again, if it's a big impact, we dive into it more. It is one of the things I've been talking about with my team. As we're a new team, one of the things we're exploring is, what are our team values? And values are interesting, but after reading a book called The Dichotomy of Leadership, it was really interesting, because I think values are more interesting in dichotomies, because very rarely are we looking at one value. We're often looking at the tension between two values. So in this case, I might contrast curiosity and decisiveness. Either one of those in an extreme can be detrimental. Anything in an extreme can be detrimental. So how do we find that balance? Like, if we're just curious at the extreme, we'll always be asking questions, we'll always be refining, we'll never call it done and move on. And if too much on the decisiveness, well, we're shooting from the hip, we're making decisions without the right information, and we'll be making the wrong decisions often. So again, like, where do we find those balance? So I think this is a great example of how to kind of figure out, where is that balance between continuing to be curious and making a decision and moving on.
All right, thanks for that. And Mahesh, we see your question. I've added it to the list. You'll be number 4 today. When I saw this question, my reaction was overthinking. I feel like we're too often underthinking. Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of overthinking. I'm seeing more underthinking and rushing, and I loved what you said about, let's consider these risks. Let's consider what happens if we deliver something that isn't right for the customer or end user. And of course, in what you're doing, it's even scarier, since it has to do with health and medication, and that risk has to be taken quite seriously.
Absolutely. Patient safety. I mean, everything we do comes down to improving patient safety and reducing healthcare costs. And sure, if we don't optimize healthcare costs, it'd be better. The better we do at it, obviously, it's good for us as consumers. Our healthcare costs will be lower, and it's good for the hospitals. But safety, you can't cut corners there.
Yeah, so I can't think of a lot of examples of overthinking in UX. I still feel like there's too much underthinking. And that's why I push critical thinking so much, because I sometimes I see people do things in their UX job or in a startup or in a boot camp, and I say, "Why'd you do that?" And they're like, "The school said to do it." So I think I'd like to see more thinking.
So maybe another way of framing it is, instead of overthinking, is, when do you push for more? Obviously, we tend to be under more constraints than we would like to be. When do we figure out how to work within those constraints and just do the best we can given that? And when do we push back against those constraints? So to me, it's the same thing. Like, if it's a low risk, low value, just kind of needs to get done, all right, I'm okay cutting some corners. May not be ideal, but again, the incremental value of doing it great may not be worth the effort. Whereas again, if it's high value to the organization or high risk to the customer or the organization, then it's worth pushing on. And I also find, and one of the reasons I emphasize risk, just from experience, the psychology research tells us that as humans, we don't really have a bias between seeking gain or avoiding risk. But my subjective experience in the business world seems to feel like people want to avoid risk more than they seek gain. So that has led me to using risk as a framing mechanism for a lot of UX work. And I think that can be different from a lot of us as designers who got into this to make the world a better place. So we often think about, how do we make things better and make people awesome and kick ass and all that. That may not be the language of the people who we need to convince to do the work.
That's
so
right.
If they're using more of a risk-based language, and that's the frame that they're in, it can be helpful to adjust how we talk about what we do from their perspective.
Completely agree. I teach a lot of the same things in my slides and workshops and books, so totally agree there. Let me move to the next question, because even though this one came in earlier, I think 3 people asked me this today in 3 different ways. So I think this one's going to be pretty hot, and we might get a little deep in discussing it. I started out as a UI designer, and most of my projects are UI related. And my job, I work mostly UI. But right now, I think I can't get a job because they're guesses with zero research. Now I'm confused on where to start or what to do.
Oh, that's a tough one. So my assumption here, I'm just going to put it out there because it'll bias. It's just where my thinking is coming from. So if I'm making the wrong assumption, let me know. Is that the person asked the question, or maybe the folks who have asked you these questions, coming from more of that UI visual design background and are trying to get a UX, more generalist UX job,
Yeah,
and
that is
finding that
usually the
struggle
case. I
because they
can't
haven't
speak.
done the.
Yeah, I can't speak to the person who sent this in since these come in anonymously, and I didn't check with anonymous person. But the what I hear a lot of is I got a freelance job, or I have some work on Behance, or but it's mostly UI work, or I was brought in to do UX, but I'm really just visually designing, guessing at screens. And now people feel stuck because they have some visual design or UI experience. They're trying to get into UX, and they don't understand how to make that transition because they haven't been doing the work. They can't get the junior job that's looking for the year, give or take, of UX work. So, thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I have noticed a lot working with different teams that people have a difficult time using their imagination to think what a candidate might be able to do. We struggle
Sure.
to hire on potential. And I think that's all of us, even in our so-called creative field. We don't get very creative when we look at someone and go, wow, what could this person be if they were part of our team and we helped grow them? What are they bringing? And what could that become? So I think that's somewhat on us as hiring managers and as teammates to be more open and look at the potential that candidates are potentially bringing. And I think that might allow us to see different things in different candidates. We have someone on my team, and I have deep respect for her. She spent the first 20 years of her career as a pharmacist, and then wanted to transition into UX and went to a boot camp. So she is probably the least experienced UX person on our team, but has this tremendous um, professional experience in a domain that's very specific and very relevant to what we do. And I also just have respect because after, it's so, I can't imagine how hard it would be. I mean, talk about like low ego, to go from a profession where you have deep expertise and then later in life start over as a novice.
Right.
That, when it kind of reminds me when I started karate. I remember being as a white belt and I was sitting there at 40, and there was a white belt 5-year-old next to me, and I was like, we're the same rank. It's good. It takes your ego right down. Uh, but as far as what to do about it, I mean, a couple thoughts. One is, if you're able to find a job that leverages your strengths, but has opportunity for you to grow in the direction you want. So that could be if there's a UI visual design related work, but maybe there aren't other UX designers and you can start to take on some of that work. Or maybe there are and you can learn from them and start to collaborate with them more. You can find work based on where you're strong and then use that as a base to grow from. Um, that at least would give you some concrete experience and case studies you'd be able to share. The other side of it is maybe a little bit harder, but can you take some of the work that you've done and sort of retrospectively at least figure out, like, what was the logic behind it? Why did you make the choices you did? What would you have done differently based on what you know now? I mean, hypothetical isn't going to be great, but at least it can show that you're starting to think along these dimensions. That'd be less preferable because I'll be honest, even as a hiring manager, I'm going to weight that lower than someone who has the actual experience. But it at least shows that you're thinking in these ways. Another thing I often suggest to people, if they can do it, like I don't suggest anyone work for free. If you're doing good work, you should be paid. The one exception is if you volunteer for a nonprofit that you care about. And so if there's like a local group that does something valuable, maybe it's a food kitchen or a homeless shelter or something around pets, there's a cause you care about. If there's a local group, odds are they have some digital media that needs help. And you could probably talk to them, and whether you want practice doing journeys or personas or wireframes, whatever it is in the world of UX that you want to do, they probably would love to have you help them with it. And it's real work. It's a real client. And I think that for me, that would carry more weight than either your hypotheticals or even the case projects that people do in boot camps, which you start to see the same thing over and over again for people who've been through the same.
How many cupcake
classes.
shops have you seen?
Yeah.
If I can jump in on that one too. I do tend to agree that it's just going to be a matter of study and practice, and that there are many different ways to practice, including the things Jeremy said, like some of the volunteering or trying to see if you can do some things for free. My only caveat there is that sometimes the work you end up getting through those avenues is not really UX. Sometimes it's a company that says, can you design our email newsletter, or can you just change some of our web pages? I caution people that probably won't look like a UX project in your portfolio unless you can bring in some sort of UX process. Otherwise, it's probably, especially to old folks like me and Jeremy, it's going to look like web design. And so, though I don't want to speak for him, so I think that you want to make sure that even if you are going to do work for free or low pay, try to bring in something that feels UX-y into it. Try to do some research up front. Try to interview 8 of their customers. Don't interview 2. Don't just interview the shop owner. Try to interview 8 people, a decent number of people. Understand why you picked those 8. When I can't speak for Jeremy, he's right here. He'll speak after I stop yapping. But when I'm interviewing people, I ask them a lot of why. Hey, looks like you interviewed 3 people. Why only 3? Where did you find them? Why were they good people to talk to? And if people go, well, I don't know, the boot camp said just find a few people and talk to them, comes off as a bit of a weaker answer than, hey, this is the recruiting process that I had. First, I ran a screener survey to try to find my target audience. Then I blah, blah, blah. Like, usually people like Jeremy and I want to hear that you have some sort of process. And it doesn't have to be an inflexible, rigid process, but it has to have a lot of, I know why I did this. Jeremy, you want to pick up from there?
Absolutely everything. I agree with everything. And maybe what I would add, there may not always be like a deep process, but there should at least be a logic. There should be a reason why you're doing what you're doing. And the one thing I would add, or one other thing I would add, when you're doing volunteer work, you can say no. If you go to a group and say, hey, I would love to help you with this, these are the ways in which I would work. And they say, well, actually, what we want you to do is that other thing. You can say, that's actually not what I'm looking for. I wish you the best in finding someone who can help you with that. I'm going to go to the next group on my list. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry, I'm doing a popular Italian dance that goes with a popular song that is called Ciao Ciao. Bye. Ciao Ciao. And I also remind people that where possible, if you can find a mentor, a free mentor, a paid coach, somebody to take a look at your work as you go, you will level up much, much faster, because now you have, just like you may have taken piano lessons, karate class, you will level up faster when you have someone who can look at your work and go, ooh, that research plan is a bit sketch, a bit dodgy. Let's take another look at that and help you understand how to do something better. Ooh, hey, these wireframes are a little funky. Let's take another look at them. And I think not only will that work be good practice work where you can level up, but then you've got something you can put in the portfolio and speak to that process. We've got another question coming in from Noel on YouTube, and we will put it at the end of the list. But I think we've probably beaten this one to death. What do you say, Jeremy?
I mean, we can always beat it more, but let's go to the next one.
Okay. The next question is a long question. You know, sometimes people tell us their stories. Remember, if you have a question to ask, just put it here in the live chat, or you can ask it anonymously. Just go to deltacx.com/links, and you'll see a link to ask your question anonymously. For people who like to complain about their jobs. So hold on a moment. This one is long. I need to drop the font down. All right, I'm going to read this one out because it's long and it's what I do. It says, after working as a researcher for a while, I think I'm becoming disillusioned with the field. I love what I do, but I've been working for a lot of big companies where it feels like although we have big teams of product design and research, insights from UX work rarely make a real impact on strategy. It feels like a slog to constantly have to prove your usefulness to product managers and engineers, and it always comes down to the bottom line of whether something will move metrics for the company first and foremost. What do you think? Does real user-centered design really exist? Is it possible to do UX for a large company and genuinely be user-first in your design? I'd love to stop feeling so pessimistic.
Oh, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that that's your experience. I think that a lot of folks can kind of get beaten down in these environments. It was one thing I neglected in my intro. I started a podcast. We're kind of on a break right now as we get reorganized, called Saving UX. And it started from hearing a lot of these stories about people who were in these tough environments and either feeling like they were alone in it or it was somehow their fault, which is not the case. There is a lot of headwinds, shall we say, to doing good work. And I don't think it's just in UX. I think, you talk to engineers, you talk to product, everyone's frustrated. But I think as one of the newer-ish practices and typically one of the smaller ones, or at least maybe because I'm inside of it, it feels like our struggle is pretty big. Anyhow, that being said, my first thought is whether or not the metrics that the business is trying to move are aligned with the interests of the people you're trying to serve. That's kind of like for me, my first question. And often it should be, right? Because if you're trying to sell something or serve someone in some way, and you're going to expect them to pay you with, currency, attention, whatever else, you want to be doing something that's valuable to them. I have definitely worked in places where there was a confrontational relationship between users and the business. I did not like that at all. If that's the case, go somewhere else. That's going to be really uncomfortable. But if the metrics are aligned with the providing value for your customers, then it would make sense that you want to move those metrics. Now, I love the phrase, money to a company is like air to a person. You need it to breathe, but if you're living to breathe, you're missing the point. So money shouldn't be the only metric. But we need to make money as an organization. We all want to get paid. We have our rent, et cetera, our families to support. But it should be something more than that. So those metrics should go beyond just the financial into something that is meaningful to our users. And again, if that's the case, then our research should align with those. We should be trying to figure out how do we make those better? How do we improve the lives and the outcomes of the people we're serving? I have seen large research teams that spent a lot of time on things that were somewhat, or at least were perceived to be inconsequential. And anytime you're doing something that is perceived to be inconsequential, whether you believe it or not, that is trouble for you and your work. So you may have to figure out, how do I balance doing the work that others are asking for and that they value, while maybe I have a side project to do the thing that if I believe that if I can actually demonstrate it, then people will see the value in it. Or I have this hunch that there is a problem over here and we're just not looking at it. But if I could show the research, if I could do this, then I could demonstrate that there's an opportunity here. And again, you may have to do that as a side project, but you can only carve out that space if you've earned enough trust with your partners that they give you the freedom to do that. So again, kind of like dichotomies. One of the other sayings I try to live by, and I find it applicable in lots of dimension, is adapt to the world you have while fighting for the world you want. And you have to do both. If you only adapt, if you don't adapt to the world you have, you will find yourself in trouble and very unhappy. And if you only adapt and you don't fight for the world you want, you'll also probably be fairly unhappy. So, but if you're only fighting for a future that you believe in without kind of being in the present, you may have trouble surviving.
Thanks. I'm going to jump on this one. So I want to attack this from a few angles that in addition to what Jeremy said. So first of all, if you are going to jump to another job, please look at episode 129 that we did here. If you haven't watched that one already, that was questions we should be asking during job interviews. And I think that it's important as you're interviewing to try to figure out what kind of environment this is. Are designers and engineers waiting for research insights? Or, Jeremy, you look like you have something to say.
Oh, I struggled with this for years, mostly because there were a lot of times that I was asked to come in and join a company with the express purpose of building a UX practice. And then I would get there and nothing happened. And part of it was like in the early parts, like, oh, these people said they cared about user centricity and UX and they don't, they lied. And I think the more nuanced understanding that I came to a little bit later was, well, they care, but there's a lot of other things they care about more. So,
or they don't know how to get there.
It's right. Or they don't know how to get there. So now, I'm asking questions about other organizational change they've been through. Other cultural change they've been through, other difficult transitions the organization has weathered, how that worked, what worked well, where the organization was challenged, because that's going to give me a sense of how a transition might go. I'm looking for what kind of executive support is there. Is this do the person I report to, or is there someone else on the executive team that has, if not direct UX experience, has led UX groups in the past and is going to be a strong advocate for what we're doing? Without strong advocacy, it's going to be impossible to make progress. You can't really do it. You can do it from the ground up. I won't say you can't. You can. It is just harder. A far longer and more difficult process. Doable, just as well. When I interviewed a friend of mine, he said, no organization will move as fast as you want. So how much frustration are you willing to put up with?
Yes. So circling back to what I was shooting at. So first of all, watch episode 129 for some questions you can ask so that you don't go out of the frying pan into the fire. Another thing that we didn't know from your story, so I'm not saying you haven't done this, but have you spoken to your manager about the situation? Because I know many of these researchers who ask us these Tuesday questions, they often feel like, why am I even here? You said you wanted a researcher, but you're not letting me do my work. Or you said you wanted a researcher, I'm doing my work, nobody's paying attention to what I'm finding. And so I think these are questions to have with management and leadership, maybe even manager and skip manager, because the question is, what are you doing there? They needed you, they hired you, but you somehow don't seem integrated in the process. And the question is, where can they integrate you into that process? And they don't have to change the entire company overnight. Can you work with one team? Can you work with one team who's willing to wait for research and say generative research, exploratory, discovery, whatever it might be, because this probably isn't the evaluative. Many companies will make a little bit of time for evaluative. This is probably more generative. So can you find one team that's willing to put off some of their design and engineering a few weeks, a month, so that you can do a really solid generative research project? And hopefully this can be some sort of internal case study to show why we need more of this, even if it starts out being a little bit mysterious and only some teams are doing it, but it might have to be that internal sell. What companies are doing a great job at user-centered design? Not a lot, which is why I'm writing another book on it. So Yeah, I think everybody by now knows my next book will be called Transforming Toward Customer Centricity, and I'm once again trying to help companies. Really, a lot of the things that Jeremy and I have been saying. Look at that risk, and cut the risk and the waste of all the cycles of guesses and assumptions, and making sure we're releasing what people want. So I don't think I've got a fix for you here. I can only say that this is a common complaint, and I'm looking at UX leadership to do something about this. I know Jeremy, where he is right now, is a UX leader, and there are times where he's able to push, push, push and make a difference, and there's times where he's compromising, or there's times where he's pushing and he can't make a difference, right? Jeremy, am I saying the
Oh,
wrong thing
absolutely.
here?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we need more of that kind of person who's going to do that pushing, because to me, the UX leader who has said, yeah, whatever, we'll just go fast, we don't really need these researchers, yeah, whatever, that to me is a UX leader I would like to have a nice private chat with, because I think that's ultimately what's hurting us a lot, is we need to be able to say no and push back, or maybe sometimes Jeremy has to say yes this time, but next time it's going to work like this, and be that leader.
Can I add one other thing on the notion of
Of course.
burnout?
Yeah.
I've just noticed the last 2 years have been rough, whether it's COVID, politics, social issues. There is often an energy tax that we're paying just to get up in the morning. So I think it has led a lot of us to have just less ability to be patient or adapt to some of the challenging situations we're in. And if you think that might be you, I know it gets overused, but do the self-care things, take care of yourselves, take breaks, exercise, eat well, sleep. I'm terrible at the sleep part.
Take your time off.
Yeah, take your time off, use that vacation time. You need breaks. The world's in a challenging place right now, and it definitely affects our who we are and how we're able to cope with work.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you for that. Okay, so let me queue up our next question. And of course, good luck to the person who wrote in. We hope to hear from you in the future. Let us know how you're doing. Okay, this one's a tough. I think we can't totally answer this one because there's just too many scenarios. But the question says, may I know how to decide on which UX research method to use in which scenario?
I mean, different research methods answer different kinds of questions. So it depends on what are you trying to learn? And so if you can be clear on what you're trying to learn and what your constraints are, that's going to really narrow the options in front of you. Are you looking for something that requires qualitative feedback? Are you looking for something more quantitative? Are you looking for something specifically around a particular behavior, or are you looking for something more data-oriented demographic? So there's a wide variety of tools available to us, but kind of just getting clear on what you want to get out of it should, and again, your constraints should help narrow down those options.
And a quick thanks to the people sending in questions anonymously. I am getting them. I'm just adding you to the bottom of the list. I don't want you to think we're ignoring you or we forgot about you. We have a bit of a list today, and I am adding those questions to the bottom. And
one
yeah,
thing to add,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to add, I think it was Jeff Patton had a learning canvas, and it started with something like, what are the things you know now, and what are the things you want to learn? And what I liked about it is it also had a space for what are all the different experiments you could do to learn that thing. And then, you could evaluate them, whether it's on the cost, the fit for purpose, and decide which one of those possible experiments you're going to do. But I think all too often it's just easy to go, okay, I want to learn this thing. I'm going to use this technique because I'm familiar with it, et cetera. And off we go, as opposed to taking a moment and go, well, what are all the different ways I could learn the thing I need to learn? And let me evaluate them and then make a choice. So sometimes just taking a step back and thinking about different options might also be helpful.
Yeah, and I think I want to answer what I think the question is asking, which is Jeremy and I cannot direct you to some sort of matrix that says, oh, if you want to learn this, do this. It's always going to be, excuse me, critical thinking, looking at what are the open questions? What are you trying to learn? Is this early generative research? Are you evaluating a concept or design? So there isn't some sort of matrix we can direct you to somewhere that says, if you're doing this, then do this. It really is the type of job where you just have to learn about some of the different methods and their pros and cons and how long they take and what they cost, like Jeremy said. And then you have to make decisions based on time, budget, outcomes, etc. So we can't direct you to a matrix where you just follow the menu.
It's like, I mean, I started trying to do a playbook to get there, but there are just a number of factors that come into play, and anything along those lines, you're going to oversimplify to a point. So it was useful as a starting guide for maybe folks who didn't have a strong background in research or in other UX practices, and it kind of gave a framework. But I think George Bach said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. It was a useful exercise, but it was certainly incomplete.
I dig it. Yeah, I co-wrote a playbook at my previous job, and instead of trying to prescribe that, we just said, when it comes to UX research, the UX researchers will decide the method, because we had problems with product managers trying to dictate what was done and how when they really didn't have that domain knowledge. All right, good luck to our junior researcher. Let's put up our next question. What differences in skills do you see in those who came from boot camps and those with master's degrees in human-centered design and information systems?
I mean, it's kind of night and day between someone who might be a career switcher and is going to go through a 12-week program and someone who spent 2 years in an academic program. It's a big difference. So yeah,
So yeah.
it's a huge difference. Now, maybe to pivot off this a little bit, there's a lot of criticism against boot camps, a lot of it well-deserved. I do think, though, it is a bit more of a systemic problem in that there just aren't enough entry-level jobs out there. Like, why is it that you can go to a 12-week coding boot camp and get a job developing, but you can't go to a 12-week UX? And again, I'm not suggesting that you'll learn everything about code or everything about UX in that short amount of time. What I'm suggesting is that we're missing those opportunities to bring junior people into our organizations and mentor them and help them grow, who may have started with just a very low level of knowledge. And I think at least what I'm seeing as I've been hiring in the last year or so, the competition at the senior level and up is intense. There's just like a lack of people. The competition is strong. It's a great time to be in that market. I think when we posted an associate role and I put it out on LinkedIn, we had over 100 applications in a day. And that sucks. I mean, I would love to talk to everyone, but the reality is I'll never even get a chance to look at all those resumes. I'm going to go through a handful. We're going to start our interview process. If we hire someone, great. And if we don't, we'll go through the next handful. But it just shows that, just as one example, I mean, we had to shut down the taking in new applications at that point because there wasn't really much point beyond 100. But it just shows like how many people are out there looking for that entry level work. So my challenge to other UX leaders is find ways to bring more junior people into your organization, find ways to create those opportunities. We have to train the next generation of practitioners so that, as if we're doing our jobs and advocating for the work, there's going to be more demand. If we don't help grow people, we won't be able to meet that demand. So let's help folks grow, get them into our organizations. There's so many people with potential out there, but they need our help.
And speaking of cutting off applications, we now have more questions than we'll have time. So I'm going to say no more questions. We've got 5 questions and we've got about 20 minutes, especially if Jeremy has a hard stop. Yeah, so so I would say I agree with Jeremy. While we still do have to review master's degrees because some of them really do suck, and I've heard bad things about some of them. In general, I think while you don't need university education to start in UX, it often is looked at with a little bit more respect. That there is a degree. So I would say some of these people do have an easier time finding their first job because of the amount of education that they have. Sometimes they've also done an internship. Sometimes they have other experience. And so I would say university programs where you have the time and money can be a good choice, but you still have to do your research because not all programs are the same and not all programs are good, unfortunately. So,
Agree.
moving
And we
on.
don't, I took bachelor's degree or any degree requirement off of our job descriptions. I don't think it's necessary. If you've done the work and you can demonstrate that you can do the work, I think that's what's important. A
Yeah,
degree can help with that, but I don't think it's required.
totally agree. Totally agree. Okay, jumping to the next question since we have to shift into lightning mode. I'm really confused about app critique sessions during product design interviews. So, sounds like a job interview. Would love to get any advice from you on how to do an app critique properly. I don't know if you've heard this, Jeremy, but it sounds like instead of a design challenge, some people are being shown an app or a website and they're being told to critique it.
Yeah, so this falls into some challenging interview practices. And I get where people are trying to do. They want to see how people think, and I think have this belief that somehow you can prepare and cheat your way through an interview, which I'm not sure I buy, especially if the interview is focused on work you've done in the past. I mean, I guess you could lie about that, but you're going to tell me the story, and if we ask good questions, we're going to get the truth out of what happened.
Totally agree.
So what you've done is going to be the best indicator of what you're going to be able to do. And even if it's how what were you able to learn, how fast were you able to learn and adapt, even if you haven't done what I might ask you to do, if you've learned and adapted in other environments, then I gives me confidence that you'll learn and adapt in ours too. I tried doing design challenges for a while, whether they were whiteboard challenges or stuff like this, and they just failed over and over again. In fact, I would get candidates that got great references and they bombed at the team challenge. In fact, I hired a former colleague, and in the interview process, they also bombed the whiteboard challenge. Um, and I'd worked with this person. I knew what they were capable of, but you're putting people in a really high stress scenario. And unless that's your organization, and yes, if you're a consultant in an agency, you're often in high stress scenarios in front of clients. That might be a little bit different. But for most product companies, you should be in a more collaborative environment. And look, I have ADHD. I've done theater. I'm very good at improv. I can think off the cuff. My brain just operates very quickly. And I'm very comfortable in that type of environment. I would say I excel in it. But not everyone is like me in this respect. Some people just need to take in information and have some time to digest it um, before they're able to put it together in a way that's going to be useful. So I think whether it's a whiteboard exercise or some kind of app critique, if you're forcing people to think on their feet, if that is not an absolute requirement of the job, you're going to end up filtering out some very, very qualified people who might just have a divergent learning or working style from what this exercise is going to require. And so that's why I have doing any of that. We do sort of a portfolio review per se, but it's really, look, you probably have one or two different projects that you're going to tell the story over and over again. So let's just give you a chance to tell that story to the team as a whole, so you don't have to repeat it during every individual session. However you want to tell that story is up to you. You want to do a dog and pony show in PowerPoint, fine. You want to just show us the artifacts where they were. You want to tell us a story without artifact, I don't really care. Just help us understand your process, how you think, how you work through problems, how you dealt with pivots, all the interesting stuff. I want to hear about the messy bits. So anyway, so that was not the question, but that's how we do. That's what I think about interviews and these things. So I guess to answer the question, I would probably just want to be facile with some of the basic design heuristics, and maybe even to the point where if you're getting this, if you're seeing it a lot, practice looking at things, identifying different heuristics that you can offer feedback on, so that you're more able to do that in a novel situation with a platform you're not familiar with. If you feel comfortable, you can educate your interviewer on why this might not be a great idea. You may not get the job. I had an organization give me a design challenge, and I know there are ethics, and this was a particularly egregious one because it was a design challenge based on their platform. Now, they'd already built the feature, but in my talking with them, I did not feel that they were asking for it from an unethical point. I thought they were asking for it from an uneducated perspective. So what I chose to do was do the design challenge. I presented it. In my one-on-one with the hiring manager afterwards, I explained to him why they shouldn't do that in other interviews, what the ethics challenges were, etc. I didn't get the job. It might not have been because of that, but I felt it was a good choice. I still think I made a good decision there.
And we've got Solomon in the live chat saying, hey, not everyone's looking for the same thing during those so-called app critiques. Sometimes the interviewer wants to see a structured approach at reviewing design. Sometimes the interviewer just wants to discuss the usability of certain patterns. So to me, it's one of the many things wrong with anything that qualifies as some sort of design challenge or interview challenge, because they very rarely tell you what they're looking for and how they're going to judge you. But I think my advice, if I were given a critique during an interview and I chose to do it, I would just stick to facts, because I would probably, if I gave it to somebody, which I would never do, I would be listening for them saying like, I don't like this, or I don't think this is good, or I have empathy, so therefore this. I would be listening for someone who understands heuristics, information architecture, Gestalt, and someone who says, hey, look, these are some things that I'm noticing that seem to violate these heuristics or not be a good match or whatever, but this is something that should be researched. You know, right now, this is just my opinion off the cuff from you showing this to me right now. This does not replace good research with our users. At least that's what I would do.
I think you brought up something really critical there, which was assumptions about intent. And in our practice, we try to minimize as many assumptions as we can. So even in these scenarios, I think it's okay to ask, what are you looking for in this exercise? What are you hoping to see, or what will my participation tell you? And so that because there's a lot of different ways I might address this, and I want to make sure I give you what you're looking for. And then they can tell you exactly what they're looking for or not. But if they're being cagey about it, that also might be a red flag. I try and set people up for success. I want people to be able to show their best self during an interview process. So we want to be really open about what we're looking for.
Great. Okay, we are badly running out of time. I assume you have a hard stop because you have a real life and a real job?
I don't. I think I blocked off some extra time for you, Deb, because I like to.
Okay, well then we'll just answer the questions we have. No more new questions, please, and we'll try to get all of them done. Thank you, Jeremy, if you can stay. Okay, so our next question said, hello, Debbie and Jeremy. What tips and advice would you give to choosing a mentor? I've learned from you, Debbie, to check how long they've been doing real UX on LinkedIn. Is there any tip to get them to be your mentor? Jeremy, will you be my mentor?
Vice versa. Part of me, I would say, is the person doing what you would want to do? Like, do you respect them? Do you look up to them? Are they in a role that you'd want to have? And when you start meeting with them, do you feel like their advice kind of connects with you? We all kind of come from slightly different places, and someone might, if Debbie and I were talking to two different people, someone might resonate more with Debbie, what you might say, they might resonate with me, or neither of us. So, because we all also just come from slightly different places, so we all have our biases and what we're gonna advocate for. And a good mentor will be less biased and be able to kind of take their ego out of the conversation, though that's a little hard for all of us, because our advice tends to come from our experience. So try them out. You don't have to commit to someone to be a mentor unless you're paying them. But if you're paying them, you can stop paying them. But my wife years ago introduced me to the concept of informational interviews because she was brilliant at them. She would just reach out to people who were doing the work she wanted to do and ask if they would have half an hour to tell them about their life. And lots of people agree because people love talking about themselves, especially people, say, demographically like me. We love talking about ourselves. And she was never asking for a job, though she was often looking. But she just asked them lots of questions about, their history and how they got to do what they do. And, well, some of them would ask her what she was doing, and then she could talk about herself, and sometimes left those with job offers. But at the very least, you're starting to connect with someone. You're seeing, does their experience connect with what you want to do? And if you have a good rapport, and if you do, then you could ask if they'd be willing to meet with you again. And it doesn't have to be an official, will you be my mentor? It could just be, could we meet again? Could we connect again in a month? And if that works out, hey, I'd love to set up a regular time with you. Would that be okay? So it could, you could evolve into it when you find, people that you connect with.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of asking. I get asked it a lot, and I think it's a perfectly fine question to ask. Unfortunately, I have to say no to a lot of people because I just don't have the time to add more free mentoring since I'm already free mentoring a large block of people. I do have paid coaching sessions. Obviously, not everybody can afford that, and I apologize, but I just cannot say yes to free mentor everybody. So I think not only do you have to consider that, but consider if you have any budget, just in case there's someone, doesn't have to be me, who happens to be charging, who is someone you trust and want to work with, and you have goals and direction, and could be worth it, like the old piano lessons. I like to comment from the YouTube chat that says, my mentors don't know they're my mentors. And someone wanted to know what you think of ADP list.
I'm aware of it. I haven't really delved into it, so I don't really have much of a comment. It's been on my radar as something to look more into, but I haven't, so I can't give an opinion.
Okay. And most people know my opinion is fairly negative. I don't like the attitude the owner, president, whatever takes towards UX in general. And I've seen amazing people get rejected from there, and I've seen some, in my opinion, unqualified people get accepted to there. So to me, it's a strange bird, and if it works for you, then it works. But that's why I suggest people double check people on LinkedIn to make sure you're getting someone with the time and depth and expertise that you want, because you're not always getting that. Next question. Okay, this is a longer one. Hi, I'm a junior UX designer with less than 1 year of experience in a small company. Unfortunately, I'm the only designer in the company. They hid that at the interview. And I do everything: research, user flows, wireframing, prototyping, UI, etc. I learned a lot from my projects, and I try to learn on my own. Thank you and Larry Marine. But I often feel stuck and want to learn from other experienced designers. I'm thinking about quitting my job. So here's my question. What's your advice for a junior UX designer? What should I look for in a future company? And how damaging was this start for me?
First of all, there's no damage done.
Agreed.
You are not damaged. You experienced it. You probably got a lot of stress. And well, stress is damaging to us, but everyone gets stress everywhere. So I don't know that you got any more than anyone else, but you are not damaged because of this. Your career is not hurt. You will be just fine. In fact, you probably learned a heck of a lot. For example, what questions to ask during the interview? What's the team like?
Episode 129.
Yeah, there you go. Episode 129. So we all need mentorship at every level. And sometimes we'll get that from our peers and our colleagues. Sometimes we have to get it from outside of our company and outside of our workday. If you are enjoying the work and you enjoy enough about the company and the mentorship is the only thing you're missing, you can look for that external mentorship. In fact, if the company recognizes that you need it, you might even go talk to them and say, hey, what I really need is to pay someone. I want to pay someone like Debbie or one of the other qualified UX coaches out there who could provide you with ongoing an ongoing relationship to give you detailed feedback, ideally signing an NDA so they can look at your design work. So they're not just giving you the career coaching, but also kind of some of the detailed feedback on the work you're doing. If that's not feasible, you can consider leaving. Look, you do learn a lot by messing up. I've certainly learned a lot in my time by making mistakes. It's a painful way to learn. The lessons do tend to stick with you, though, unless you're really thick-headed. That has happened to me a few times. It's a painful way to learn, but you will certainly learn that way if you're on your own. The challenge, though, there will be times you won't realize you messed up because no one's there to notice things that you're missing because you're missing that context. So again, wherever you are in your career, like I turned down a lot of leadership roles early in my career because I didn't feel like I was ready. I wanted to keep learning from more experienced people. And even when I did step into UX leadership roles, I was still looking for organizations that might help me, like might have strong leaders that I could learn to be a better manager, a better leader, even if that wasn't specifically in UX, but they were a great product leader or a great executive, and they had experience there. They were still someone I could learn from. So that's been a huge component of my career search, is finding people that I could learn from. So I think I've covered the bases here. I'm going to start getting repetitive. So Debbie, what's your take on this?
Yeah, thanks. And then we've got two more questions after this, and so thanks for running a little bit late. So first of all, to this person, we feel ya. This is still common. I'm glad you've been learning from the channel, which is a reminder, hey, everybody, won't you please subscribe to the Delta CX YouTube channel? We are sadly still shadow banned on YouTube, but we've got over 5,000 subscribers, so we're relying on you to please help spread the word because YouTube's not doing it for us. So I'm glad you're learning from us, and that's great. I think moving on to a company where you will have more of a larger team and have seniors and other people you can work with, and the design critiques and collaborations will be important. Again, episode 129. And I think ultimately what it's going to come down for you, if I can give you the shorter answer, would be storytelling. You're going to need to take whatever you've been doing for the last year, even if it was weird pieces of things and some disjointed priorities and things that went out of whack pretty fast, and you're juggling 4 full-time jobs masquerading as one. You're going to have to find a way to tell your story. Now, we've got a couple of videos on that on the Delta CX YouTube channel, so just go to YouTube and write Delta CX storytelling. You're probably going to see Leandre's about 3 times, but these put in Delta CX portfolio. There's got to be 10 videos. So I think it's going to be important for you to focus on the storytelling of what you've done, because you have done stuff and you've probably done some good work, and it hasn't been a waste, but it's certainly been, if nothing else, a learning experience in what kind of environment you don't want to work in, and that you might want a job that's a little more specialized, or at least 2 of those 4 full-time jobs, and and narrow it down a bit. So that would be my suggestion there. Kelby in the chat says, take everything you've learned and believe in yourself, that you're no longer quite so junior. Beautiful.
One other thing to add.
Sorry, just a quick note to the YouTube channels. We are out of time for your questions, so we won't be able to answer any more questions today. And so please come back next Tuesday. We do this every Tuesday. Please come back next Tuesday and ask your questions so that we can make sure you get the help you need. Jeremy, something else to say about this before I show the next question?
Yeah, because I say one of the anti-patterns that I hear stories about is junior people, even if they join a larger team, end up siloed on the work and not getting the support they're looking for. So I'm not sure if you cover this in episode 129, if maybe you do, and if I apologize, but make sure you ask what the collaboration looks like between team members, and not just the hiring manager, but ask the other team members that you interview with, how often they work with others, what those interactions look like, and that'll give you a good sense of what it might look like for you if you were to join the team.
Yeah, and episode 129 was with Julia DeBari, so she had a whole PowerPoint, and it was a beautiful thing. Our next question is a little strange, but I think we can turn it into something. It says, hello, Debbie and Jeremy. How do I get better at open questions when planning research? Any advice or tips?
When planning? Oh,
I get
interesting.
the
It's
yeah.
usually
So
the
I don't
question of
know.
when executing.
Right. Yeah. I get the feeling this person is planning research. Maybe they're used to surveys where they're used to asking a question and giving people predefined answers. So I do find that a lot of people learning research do tend to be bad at, I don't want to say bad, but do tend to need a lot of love when it comes to more open questions to let the people just answer rather than boxing them into an answer.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at a question, it can be helpful to ask what kind of bias you're adding with that question, because even open-ended questions can still contain bias.
That's true.
I've started to do a little bit of investigation into something called clean language, which was developed in a therapeutic space, but it's intended to help discover people's kind of mental metaphors for things. But a big part of that is how to ask completely unbiased questions. So, like one example I was given, if Debbie and I were both to think about frogs, sure, everyone knows what a frog is, um, but we might be thinking about a very different one. So, I could ask like, what kind of frog is your frog? And that's fairly open.
Tiny
Where
tree
is that frog?
frog.
Oh, it's a tiny tree frog. Where is that frog?
I don't know.
You don't know? What else is there about that frog? So, there are certain techniques you can use to ask questions that are very neutral, very open. Tell me more about this. What about this? What is your reaction to this? Um, that are inherently unbiased. Now, there may be times you want a very specific answer. You want to create some boundaries around the answer you get, and that's okay too. Just try and do both. But there's a lot out there uh, on asking those open-ended questions. I mean, I often go back. I mean, it's been a long year since I've read it, but I definitely remember, is it Contextual Inquiry? No, Contextual Design by Holtzblatt and Beyer, being, that was a good, I mean, I think I read that when I was first starting out in the practice, like in the late 90s. But I remember that being a good book on how to really approach user research and think about things differently. So that was another one that I often share with folks. I don't know you've read that one, I imagine. What's your take on it?
No, I haven't read a lot of books. I don't enjoy reading. So usually if someone wants to talk about reading, I'm writing them. If someone wants to talk about reading a book, I send them over to Darren. I think he's read all of them by now, but I do not know. But I did want to recommend a Medium article I wrote that might help a little bit. It's called "When Better UX Research Questions Are Still Bad." And it takes a look at some of the common mistakes people make when creating some research questions that end up being biased or awkward or not quite UX research questions. So poke around that a little bit. But again, any book Jeremy recommends, I'm sure would be a good choice as well.
There's another thing that, and this is another article it had like a couple techniques in it that it was like the boomerang, the mumble, and I forget what that. But one was anytime someone asks you a question, you boomerang it back, like, "Oh, what should this do? What do you expect that to do?" Right? You
That's
don't
right.
answer the question. You boomerang them back. Um, the mumble, I think, was based on I think it was it Kojak, the '70s detective who always trailed off. But it's a great way to get someone talking. I know this you talk about planning research, but in the research session, sometimes you're not sure what to ask. So you can say, "So, what you're thinking or what you're telling me is you're looking for this to
And you're
do,"
hoping they jump
and so
in
the
and
more,
start.
because no one likes awkward silence. So you just kind of intentionally create some awkward silence and they'll fill it. So there's some like stuff like that out there that also can help, if you kind of get lost. That's more of in the live facilitation. But
Groovy. Great advice. And our last question for today, we made it. It says, I'm an individual contributor that has been trying to push for more time for discovery, but business and product wants design to deliver. How much do you compromise, considering if still new to a company?
yeah, so there's the short game and the long game. The short game is the work I'm doing right now, and the long game is what's going to set me up to be successful in the future. And then you kind of got to play both. So you're likely going to have to make compromises as you earn the trust of the people you're working with. Once you earn that trust, then you're going to be able to start making recommendations about how to better solve the problems, which is likely going to involve other UX practices that will serve the organization and serve the people that your company, your customers. So it's a little bit of that balance. How do you do both? Again, as I said before, how do you adapt to the world you're in while fighting for the world you want? So making sure you can kind of do a little bit of both at the same time. Now, you might be in the beginning, while you're building that trust, you might be heavily biased towards the delivery. That's certainly been the case when I've started a lot of organizations as the first UX person. A lot of my work is based on what the internal stakeholders know, what I've learned over the years, UX best patterns, et cetera, and I will start delivering. I know it's not the best work, or it may not solve the problem as well as I could, but I'm learning about the problem space. I'm bonding with the people that I'm collaborating with. You can't change someone's mind unless they perceive you as part of their in-group. So one thing I've said, when building a UX practice is serve the team before you serve the customer. And I know we're customer centric, but until you have built up that trust with your product, engineering, marketing, whatever the partners are, you're not going to be able to move them. So sometimes that delivery helps build that trust. Like, I'm here to support you. I'm part of your team. We're in this together. And once they feel that, and they trust that now you understand their problems, then you can start moving them. So,
And I
then
would
side
add,
projects.
I wish people, and Jeremy, tell me if you disagree with this, because you might. I wish people would stop saying things like, well, look out, I'm still new here. Look, they hired you. You got the job. I bet 200 people applied and they picked you. So stop imagining that you are not worthy, or nobody cares what you think, or I'm going to have to, Don't lessen or minimize or diminish yourself. You got the job. Go into the job assuming they like you. Go into the job assuming they trust you. Don't go in assuming, will anyone sit with me at lunch? So go in there with some confidence. You got the job. And I think it's okay to do what Jeremy's talking about, where you have to find that balance. And one thing that you might be comfortable saying, and you might not, because I've got a ballsy personality, so maybe this is just me, but see if you can say something like, if you want this work done by tomorrow, it's not going to be my best work because that just isn't enough time. And I can get you something by tomorrow, but, where are our priorities here? Do we care about doing a little bit better work up front to save us from some of the rework later? Now, again, if you're new to the company or new to UX, you might not feel like you can say that, but have this conversation with your manager. Show your manager this video. Hi, anonymous person's manager. We support you. This person needs some help and support. And this is a ways of working thing. Your company has a process, and their biggest fear is that your attempt to do a better job will slow them down and time will be money. So there has to be some way for you to say, you brought me in, you trust me, and I'm telling you this isn't enough time for me to do my best work. I can rush something out, but is that our best work? And or aren't other parts of the team getting time to do their best work? Didn't engineering get 4 sprints? I would love to get a couple of sprints myself. And if we can just plan this ahead, then I'm not holding anybody up because now we've planned it ahead. I also find that UX is rarely asked to estimate their time. What happens is somebody says, I need these screens. This is what we're making. Get it to me tomorrow. And I think that you and managers and other people need to start talking about ways of working and say, hey, look, I should be able to estimate my time. And I think that we should start doing a few days of design, a quick usability test, and a couple of days or a day or two of improving it. Keep trying to get a little bit more out of them. You're not going to be able to go from deliver tomorrow, which I'm just guessing is what's being said, to I'd like a month to work on this. That's a dream. But I think you're just going to have to go in baby steps and try to work in a round of usability testing. Hey, QA checks code before it goes live. Why aren't we checking the design and the concept before it goes to engineering? We'll save so much time if we find UX bugs now. Jeremy, something to
Some
add?
of that also, yeah, some of this also comes down to being, are there clear goals defined for the work? Do we have an outcome in mind that we're trying to hit?
Success
Sadly, most
criteria.
organizations don't, right? And if they don't, it's going to be really hard to navigate that conversation. If they do, then you can take what you're talking about and add into that. How is or how are the constraints you're being given going to impact your ability to uh, come up with a solution that will help us, that will make us more likely to meet that goal? We may not know exactly beforehand whether or not we'll be able to do it in any given time frame, but if your goal is high, we might need to go through more learning loops, more cycles of discovery. And I don't mean discovery in like the big D sense, but learn, build, measure, whatever, try something, experiment, learn from it, go through that loop, um, and see if it's likely going to hit the goal that we've set out for ourselves. But whatever we do, again, I like what you said before about being explicit around what you can do within certain constraints. I'm okay. I may not like cutting corners. Let me put it that way. I don't like cutting corners, but if we make the decision explicitly and we understand the trade offs, then I'm okay with that. At least we all did it eyes wide open, as opposed to like blinders on, like, no, 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 we just need to do it fast and we'll assume that it's all going to work out perfectly. Like, that's just, BS. That's hoping, and that's not a strategy. But if
Yeah.
we can be articulate about and explicit about those trade offs and then make a choice based on that, look, I may not always like the choice, but at least we're taking into account all the factors and we're doing it intentionally.
Yeah, and Kelby in the YouTube chat says usability testing is essential. It's often a missed step, but so much money can be saved by ironing out pain points before development. So that can help you start to battle for a little bit more time. So that is it for questions. We are over time. Jeremy, thank you so much for staying late. Remind everybody where they can find you, follow you, hear your podcast, etc.
Sure. Probably I'm most active on LinkedIn. So, you got my name down in the corner, Jeremy Kriegel, Kriegel. You can find me on LinkedIn. The podcast Saving UX is at sux.live. That's sux.live. There's tons of old episodes, including with Debbie. So you can go check those out on the site. We will be resuming episodes either late August or early September. It's been a solo operation for me, and I've got some people who are volunteering to help out. So we're going to see if we can make this a team effort to kind of keep it going. So, but there's plenty of back catalog with some just amazing guests. So you can go check those out.
Super, super. And thank you again. Thanks for all the great questions that came in. I'll be back on Friday with our Practicing Critical Thinking stream. And then I'll also see everybody next week for a week of packed shows. So everybody have a great rest of your week. Jeremy, thanks again. And we'll see y'all soon. Bye. Customer Centricity as Business Intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are